The 7 best high top shoes for working out. So I have 7 different shoes up here, all for different contexts and needs with different fits. I'll talk about the pros, cons, and when I like to use each model in this video and give you a little bit of a rundown. I tried to include pics that basically covered a wide scope of fit and training asks. I have everything timestamped down below, but all that said, let's jump in. The first model I want to cover is the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid. So I think this is one of the most slept on high top training shoes on the market in my opinion. Also, the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Low Top is also a sick shoe. Now, my favorite use cases for this model include daily wear, lifting, and some cross training. This model is a little bit more versatile than other high top shoes on the market that are going to have more of a lifting bias. So this is kind of like my do it all style shoe when I want something that I can also wear out and about that looks decently casual with different outfits. Now, 3 pros that come along with this model is number 1, the dual gradient density midsole does a really good job at giving you a nice stability, but then also enough versatility for some cross training and CrossFit. If you want a model that you can lift heavy in, but then also go do a CrossFit WOD or do some athletic style work and you like having a slightly higher boot with your shoes, this can be a really great option. The second pro that comes along with the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid is the outsole construction and how much grip it gives, but also its long-term durability. This model's outsole is a little bit thicker. There are 3 rubber compounds in this model that give it its feel and grip. And so if you are wanting your investment to go the distance and you're like myself and you do want to wear this out and about and walk a lot in it, this can be a really good feature that is very subtly nice to have in this shoe. The third thing that I like about the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid is the upper construction. So you have this Cordura nylon that wraps from the midfoot into the heel. It tends to be pretty abrasion resistant and it's also lightweight enough to give you some structure down here, but then also not limit your ankle too much. And so you can wear these loose or wear them a little bit tighter, and they tend to do a really good job at just giving you a nice level of light proprioceptive ankle support. So if that's something you're after, that's a nice feature. And then up here on the toe box, you do have a slightly stretchier knit, so your foot does typically have a little bit more room in the toe box of this shoe. I also do like that GORUCK gives you different insoles with this model to vary the fit of this shoe. Now, a couple of cons that I have with this model is if you're like me and you like to wear your high top shoes loose like this, the tongue in this model is not gusseted, so it will slide on you. So for example, I notice that my tongue always typically slides laterally when walking a bunch. It can be kind of annoying at times, but honestly, it's not the biggest deal and I kind of expect it because the tongue is lighter weight and there is no gusset, but it can be a little bit annoying if you're OCD about your tongue. The second con that comes along with this shoe is it might not have the most width through the midfoot for most folks. So if you have a flatter foot, this model can feel a little bit limiting. It's gonna feel like it's pressing into that midfoot. So definitely consider that if you have an exceptionally wide or flat foot. Overall though, the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid is a super slept on shoe. And if you've been on the market for a new high top model, definitely check them out. They are pretty dang unique. The next shoe that I wanna discuss is the NOBULL Impact High Top. So with this shoe, where's it going to be best served? If you're somebody that wants a model for lifting, casual wear, CrossFit, and cross training, that's where this model can work. It's kind of in a similar performance category as the Nano X3 Unknown and the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid in that it can do a little bit of everything depending on what you're after. Now, 3 pros that I have with this shoe is number 1, if you want an upper construction that's a little bit more durable and abrasion resistance, the super fabric upper in the shoe does a pretty good job at that. So it does a good job at resisting rope climbing abrasion and abrasion from doing burpees and whatnot. So if you are somebody who wants this shoe for CrossFit, this shoe should do a pretty good job regarding its long-term upper. And with this upper, it's super easy to clean. So if you rock this model out and about casually, it's really easy to wipe down if they get dirty, which is also a perk that I like with this shoe. The second pro that I have with this model is the midsole construction. So this model is a little bit more bouncy and responsive compared to the OG NOBULL high top trainer, which I have up there. If you want a shoe that is a little bit more running friendly and walking friendly, now not long runs here, but like runs that are shorter intervals and WODs and whatnot, this shoe will feel better compared to the OG NOBULL high top trainer. This model and the Nano X3 Unknown are both shoes that you can run shorter intervals in, and they don't beat you up too bad. Also, it's a little bit more bouncy compared to the other model, and if you plan to be on your feet all day, this shoe will typically feel a little bit more comfortable with all day wear compared to the lower stack height and denser midsole in the NOBULL Outwork High Top. The third pro that I have with the shoe is if you're somebody with a narrower foot and you like a tiny bit of arch in your shoe, that's where the shoe can excel as well. This model is not going to give you the most width in the game, but it does open up the availability for working really well for folks with narrow, medium, and then even slightly so like E-width feet. This model usually feels like a glove for your foot anatomy, and if you have a normal arch, I think you'll also like the shoe's feel and fit regarding its comfort. Now, 2 cons that I have with this shoe, the upper can be pretty dang hot, and this tongue slides at times. times, so there's no gusset on this tongue. If you wear them loose like me, this tongue can slide. And my issue with that is, unlike the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid, that tongue slides, but it doesn't cause any friction because it's lighter weight. This tongue is a synthetic material, so it does have a little bit more rub on the skin. So if you're not wearing longer socks, you might have some friction there. So keep that in mind if you do wear the shoe a little bit loose when you're rocking them casually. The second con that I have with this model is it's kind of chunky and thick. It's not the most articulate of shoe. It takes a while to break in. So while this midsole does give you a bit more bounce once broken in, expect a slightly longer runway because it is a little bit blocky. There's a thick stack height in this shoe. And if you also don't like toe spring with your shoes for lifting, that would be something to consider with this model, because with this thicker stack height and this toe spring, it can be a little bit tougher to ground the toes with the NOBULL Impact High Top. The next shoe I want to cover is the AVANCUS Apex Power High Top. So this shoe is going to be best for anybody who wants a barefoot shoe for powerlifting and strength training. This is not going to be your training shoe if you want something for more versatile workouts. It runs a little bit hot, and it's not going to give you the same midsole and the same bounce if you're not acclimated to barefoot shoes. So keep that in mind with this shoe. So 3 pros that I have with this model is, number 1, it has a really good width. So through the midfoot and the forefoot, you get a lot of room in the shoe for toe splay, and it has a fairly high upper volume. So if you have a thicker foot and a thicker instep, this can be a really good option to look into. And now that can be a knock against narrow feet, and I'll talk about that in a second, but for my wide and flat-footed friends, this can be a really great option for training and lifting. The second thing that I like about this model is its lifting performance. This shoe has a ton of articulation, so for leg day movements, it feels great, and it also has a super low stack height with an insole that you can take out to get even closer to the ground. So if you want to cut down on that range of motion and get just full ground feel with your lifting needs, this shoe can be a really great bet for accomplishing that. The third pro and thing to like with this model is the outsole traction. So with the outsole of this shoe, it wraps up on the lateral and medial side on both sides of the shoe, at the boot and up here in the forefoot. That gives you additional lockdown when you're splaying out those feet. So if you're doing sumo pulls, for example, and you're really pushing out and spreading that floor, this helps give you additional support. But the outsole itself has a ton of grip. That's kind of like AVANCUS' claim to fame for their shoes regarding lifting performance, is just how grippy this outsole is. So if you train on different surfaces or lift on different surfaces and you're pushing heavy ass weight, this can be a great option to go with if you're worried about slipping at all. Now, 2 cons that come along with this shoe is, number 1, the upper does run a little bit hot. Even when wearing this shoe loose, I find them to be pretty dang hot. So if you do have typically hotter running feet, keep that in mind. You might have to wear lighter socks with the shoe to keep the breathability a little bit better. That's also why I don't necessarily recommend this shoe for CrossFit, cross training, and more versatile training settings in the context of barefoot shoes, because it's just not the most breathable and it's not really optimized for that style of training. Another kind of note with this shoe is, if you have a narrow and low volume foot, the upper can feel almost too spacious. And when you're tightening down this midfoot, it kind of has a little bit of overlap because you just run out of room here with the midfoot lacing system. So food for thought there. It's not going to be the best option for every type of foot anatomy. But for my thicker feet and flatter feeted friends, this model is going to slap. But for my narrow feet, I would say stay clear of this shoe. Another model that I want to cover that I don't think is talked about a lot is the VIKTOS Core Combat shoe. So where I like to use this model most is for more of my outdoor sessions where I want a higher boot. This model can work in the gym, but because it has a more aggressive outsole, this can be a really great option to look into if you're rucking or training outdoors on gravel or whatnot. So if you're blending some like body weight movements in with some jogging on gravel or loose terrain, that's where the shoe is going to excel. So now 3 pros that I have with this model is, number 1, I like the high rebound EVA foam midsole. It's similar to the Core Gym from VIKTOS, which I also really like, and I think that's also a slept on shoe. But why I like it in the gym and for training is it's comfortable enough for cross training, rucking, etc. So you can wear it for longer durations, but it's also stable enough for lifting. You also have these lugs that are pretty aggressive, but I don't think they're going to take away from the midsole's ability to stabilize when you're lifting in the shoe. So overall, I like the blend of versatility and stability that you get with this shoe's midsole. The second pro that I have with this model is the reinforced upper construction. So in this upper, you have a mesh and you have synthetic overlays and more beefy nylon overlays here in the midfoot. So you do get a nice level of support and durability. This is also a shoe that I think you might be able to dabble with some CrossFit and get away with not destroying this model regarding durability from abrasion, because you do have such aggressive materials. So if you do like thicker uppers in your high top shoes, this can be a great option to look into. So for example, I'll wear this model loose, and I like that the boot doesn't have any folding and that the tongue doesn't move a ton despite not having a gusset, because it does have a slightly thicker feel than some of the other models in this video. The third pro that I have with this shoe is the outsole construction. So if you like a really rugged and rigid rubber outsole that has more aggressive lugs, and you plan to train outdoors. I cannot stress this enough again, but that's where I think the bias of the shoe is going to excel and where it's going to work best for most lifters and athletes' needs. If you're that outdoor person and you like additional ankle support with your training shoes, that's where the Core Combat is going to excel. And then as like a 3.5 Pro with this model, I like the width of the forefoot and midfoot and that it has a slightly higher upper volume. If you have a thicker or higher instep and you want a shoe with a bit more width, this shoe can excel for that context. Now, two cons that I have with this model is number one, it's not going to be the most built out, optimized high top shoe for lifting in the gym. You do have thicker lugs. It's not necessarily designed solely for that. So there are options in this video that are going to be more specific to that context. Another con that I have with this model is it can run pretty hot. Whenever you have thicker and more reinforced uppers, expect your shoes to run a little bit more warm. This shoe is no exception. So if you have hotter feet, you might want to consider your sock choice when you're training in the shoe, especially if you're outdoors in hotter climates. The next shoe I want to cover is the Reebok Nano X3 Unknown. So this is kind of a spin-off model. It's not going to be around forever, so definitely cop them if you want for the time being, because it's not going to be a shoe that necessarily is re-upped every single time once they run out of stock. But where I like this shoe most is if you're somebody that wants that more casual barefoot shoe that's comfortable for walking, short runs, cross training, and some lifting, that's where this shoe can excel. It's a little bit more running friendly than the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid, for example. So 3 pros that I have with this shoe is number one, the Float Ride Energy Foam midsole in this shoe. In the Nano X1, 2, 3, and 4, they all utilize this foam material. I like it because it's stable enough for heavier lifting, but then also bouncy enough for cross training and CrossFit. This is a little bit more of like a CrossFit biased high top shoe if that's how you plan to use this model. Not every high top shoe will work in that vertical, but this model is kind of a nice exception there. The second thing to like about this shoe is the lift and run chassis system. And so it also gives this shoe a little bit more runnability. That's essentially this TPU plate system that goes around the heel of this model. Essentially, there's like a plastic TPU dome that sits at the bottom of this heel, and it compresses when you are running and jumping, so it gives you a little bit more wiggle room and takes away from some of the density of this shoe when you're doing that type of training. The third pro that I have with the shoe is its overall appearance. I do like the look of the shoe. I typically wear my pair a little bit looser, and I like that there's a gusset because it doesn't have the tongue sliding as much like in the GORUCK Ballistic Trainer Mid. So if you do like the appearance of this shoe as well, I do think it's a good model that you can wear out and about, and it looks pretty dang good. Now, two cons that come along with this shoe. The midfoot can be wicked aggressive. So if you have a flatter foot, or if you just hate any form of arch in your shoes, this shoe can feel wicked uncomfortable. You also have this plastic TPU layer of the lift and run chassis system that can have some friction if you're pressing into it because you have a flatter foot and a little bit more spillover there. So definitely consider that if you have flat feet. I would say just probably steer clear of the shoe entirely. And then the second con that I have with this model is the toe box. Like the Nano X3, it's not the widest. And so for example, with the Nano X Unknown here, this model is a little bit wider throughout, has a bit more spacious volume at the upper. If you wore this shoe and loved it, I don't know if you're necessarily going to love the fit of the shoe if you typically like wider toe boxes. So food for thought there with the cons. They're mostly regarding the sizing of this shoe and just how it's going to fit certain anatomies. I think Reebok could have this shoe be a lot better if they just widen the toe box a little bit and maybe reworked this midfoot here to not be so aggressive with that arch material. The next shoe is the good old tried and true Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star High Top model. So this is honestly one of my favorite shoes to just throw on when I want a nice nostalgic feeling. It's one of the first shoes that I use for powerlifting and working out. Now I've since moved into other models. I very rarely wear my Converse High Top as much these days because there are a lot of great options that I think perform better than the shoe. However, there is a lot to like with the Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star High Top. So if you're a beginner to strength training and you want a high top shoe that you could also wear casually and you don't want to break the bank and you're not exactly sure how you want your shoe to feel and perform in the gym based on your training, that's where I think the shoe can still excel. Now, 3 pros that I have with this model is number one, it can be a great shoe for lifting, especially for beginners and intermediates. And honestly, even if you're more advanced and you want a stable shoe, the Converse can be a great shoe. There's a reason elite powerlifters started and have still worn Converse in competition. They have a nice stable midsole here, and also with the shoe, cheat code, they do have a thicker midsole or insole than they used to because Nike bought them out. They added this foam to give it more comfort. If you take this out and you swap in a thinner insole used in training shoes or barefoot shoes, you can get a more low to ground feel with this model and get more stability. So if you are after the shoes primarily for lifting and you want a bit more ground feel and to decrease that stack height and cushion in the shoe, check back that out, it can work pretty dang well. The second pro that I like with the shoe is its appearance. It's really tough to fault the tried and true classic appearance of the Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star. You can dress this model up, you can wear them casually in different settings, and a lot of folks just generally love how clean and simplistic they look. I will regularly rock this shoe out and about with jeans, shorts, etc., and then to the gym, and I love that they're versatile enough to do everything. The third pro with the shoe is their price point. Most of the high top shoes in this model are going to cost you $100 or more. This shoe costs anywhere from like $50 to $70. I feel like Converse just keep going up because inflation, I guess. But all that said, it is more budget friendly than other options out there. So if you are that beginner wanting that shoe for the gym, but you're not exactly sure what you want and you want a flatter shoe because this model does have a 0mm heel toe drop, this can be a great option to look into. Now, two cons that come along with the Converse is number one, even in the wide option, that's what this is, it's still not the most wide shoe. So your toe box might feel a little bit cramped if you have an exceptionally wider foot. More specifically, if you have a 3, 4E plus width foot, I would say steer clear of Converse, but likely you don't need me to tell you that because you've likely dabbled in them and have found your feet constricted before. The second con that I have with this shoe for working out is it's not that versatile. It works great for lifting, but when it comes to cross training, CrossFit, anything that you might want to do that's a bit more versatile, so short runs, for example, you're gonna find that this model typically falls short. And then as a 2.5 con, and this isn't necessarily that bothers everybody, but we do have this outsole that starts to fray over time. You start to get a little bit more fuzz, so it can cut down on some of the traction that you get with these shoes in the gym. Fun fact, when Converse gets their shoes shipped over, they're actually classified as slippers because of this, because they don't have full rubber outsoles. It's a way to save on money there. So just food for thought there, that's why your Converse are getting fuzzy on the bottom. It's a little loophole to pay less to get these shoes imported. The final shoe I want to discuss is this Nike Blazer. Oh my God, not the influencer shoe, Jake. What the heck? Why are you including it? Because it's honestly not that bad in the gym. I'll just be outright and say it. So with this shoe, how are you going to want to wear it? If you're somebody that wants a model that has a nice fashion bias, but then also works for lifting and some cross training here and there, that's where this model can excel. So three pros that I have with this shoe is number one, I like the flexibility of the shoe sole. It is surprisingly flexible. If you want a high top Nike shoe for training and you also want this to rock casually, it works pretty good in the gym. I also really like Jordans for training. So if you are a Jordans fan, you can also swap those out here versus this Nike Blazer because they're both going to work really great. Honestly, the Jordan is actually a little bit more versatile if that's something you're after as well. But in the context of giving you sole flexibility, the shoe does a surprisingly good job. The second pro that comes along with this shoe is the midsole stability. So if you want the shoe for lifting and you plan to do like heavier squats, deadlifts, and lunges and split squats, factor in the sole flexibility up here at the forefoot and you have a nice stable ride with the shoe. It's not so high off the ground to where you feel like you're kind of like floating or unstable, and the insole in the shoe, despite not being removable technically, it does have a less foamy feel compared to the Converse. So it does give you a nice stable ride when training. And then the third pro that I have with the shoe is the appearance. If you're buying this shoe, you likely enjoy the appearance of this model. That's why I bought this shoe. They do look good when they're dressed up in jeans and whatnot, so I could rock these shoes out to a bar, but then also train in them, and they do the part really well in both contexts. Now, two cons that come along with the shoe. Number one, the width. If you have wide feet or flat feet, stay clear of this model. It's not gonna feel wide enough. I would say probably look into the Jordans. You might have a better bet with those shoes, but you have a super aggressive taper here through the midfoot, and the toe box is really snug. So wider feet, flat feet, stay clear of the Blazer. The second con with the shoe is if you want a high top shoe for working out and you do a lot of cross training and you want something that's more versatile, that's where the shoe is not going to perform really well. You have a leather upper that runs pretty hot, it's a little bit heavier, and if you are doing a lot of cross training where you're dumping a ton of sweat into these shoes, I don't want you to stain the leather of this model, especially up here on the boot, so that can be something to consider. And then as like a 2.5 con to kind of piggyback on that cross training note is this boot can feel pretty uncomfortable regarding friction. If you're doing a lot of jumping or explosive work, take my word for it, it's not worth having your Achilles kind of rub here. Even if you're wearing longer socks, I think you'll notice that just because that's the nature of this leather material in this model. So it will have some limitations in the gym based on how you plan to use them. All right, y'all, that wraps up this high top training shoes for working out video. I personally have my couple favorite picks up here, depending on if I'm lifting, cross training, etc. But I'm curious, if you like high top shoes, what do you currently train in? Drop a comment down below. And then as always, if you have questions on any of these shoes featured in this video, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally on Instagram, whichever you prefer. And as always, y'all, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.